Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Pan-Celtica, the podcast where we talk about Celtic mythology, Celtic lore, Celtic stuff. All kinds of Celtic things. The last episode did serve as just as a primer, and today we're going to talk a little bit about someone that I'm sure we have all heard of, and that is Rhiannon. Most people probably have heard of Rhiannon through a lot of the current Wicca books that are out. Since the late 90s, I would say interest in Rhiannon has kind of roller coastered from my observations, but has been on a broadly, I suppose, incline. She's popular as a neo goddess in our neo magical community, and of course, when I say neo as a prefix here, I'm meaning new. That is Latin for something that is new, because we are not practicing magic and worship and working with deities and all these things. We're not doing them in the same way as our ancestors, because one, we are not our ancestors. We live in a modern world, and the way we work with spirits is different because it serves our needs in a different way, but also because we really don't know a lot of our ancestors, particularly Celtic, exactly what it is that they did do in terms of worship, belief, practice, magic spells and charms and all that. We really don't know. So we're having to guess and put things together ourselves in this global community we live in now, where we make beautiful quilts of of magical practice, which could open up a seething topic of cultural appreciation versus appropriation and assimilation and all that, but I digress. Let us return to the topic at hand, that is Rhiannon. If you did not know about her from all of the 101 books that you could find in any bookstore, you might know Rhiannon from a Fleetwood Mac song called Rhiannon. It's a beautiful song, and everyone should go listen to it right now. If you've never heard it, you should go listen to it. It's a great song. But what you might not know about Rhiannon is that she's not a goddess in terms of ancient belief. And not even ancient, but just medieval belief, where she actually really comes from. Rhiannon comes from the Mabinogi, which is a series, like a collection of stories from Wales in the medieval period. And they are stories about contemporary people, being medieval, of course, like medieval folk tales and fairy tales. But then some of them are also collections or medieval modernizations of older stories, which we would probably deem as ancient or Celtic, or as Celtic, but also as pagan. As is with virtually all pagan history that we have recorded outside of Greco-Rome, it has been recorded hundreds and hundreds of years after. So, this information isn't perfect. It's not recorded by actual pagans. It's not information or stories that are told to us by believing, practicing people at the height of this person's, worship or whatever. But Rhiannon is an archetypal story of a woman in medieval Wales who has been promised to be married to one man, but wants to be with another man, winds up actually having to be with a third man, is married, becomes queen, is accused of killing her own child, which is false. She's a woman who is constantly having to prove herself in a man's world. And she appears primarily in the first and third branches of the Mabinogi. You can think of branches as like sections of the Mabinogi. She is mentioned in the second branch, but we'll get to that in a minute. The first branch is primarily the story that I just told you in brief, which was, her struggle among these suitors and her desire to just be a free woman. She's associated with horses, and that's a perfect, metaphor. Our ancestors, even back to the 1800s, are very, very metaphorical in their stories. They love similes. They love metaphors. They love they love taking what we would say is blunt information, but then masking it in something else. We see that in the Bible too. I suppose it's just a human thing to do, but she is associated with horses. She has, in the Mabinogi, a white horse, and she rides on it wearing gold, robes laden with gold, and her horse is solid white and shines like a star. So can be seen in her golden robes, riding across the countryside in her white shining horse. So she is this beautiful, unobtainable woman, this unobtainable object to these men. And that's a perfect parallel for the horse as her spirit animal. Horses, we now see horses, as these wild, untamed, free beings. And that is the essence of Rhiannon. Rhiannon, it's been proposed by several scholars and folklorists and all sorts of people that study the Celts and history in that region. That Rhiannon is actually an amalgamation of older Celtic spirits. Now, we talked about this also in the last episode of Pan-Celtica. We talked about how, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, Morgan Le Fay, all those people are amalgamations of older Celtic gods and Celtic heroes and Celtic villains. And it is no different with the people within the Mabinogi. The Mabinogi is full of these characters that are so blatantly rehashes of older Celtic characters, some of which were gods. Now, previously I said that Rhiannon is not a goddess, and that is true for this instance. In the Mabinogi, she is not considered a goddess. She is just a real human woman who is queen, and that's it. She's just a human character. Now, in our modern neo-magical community, Rhiannon is revered as a goddess and is worshipped as a goddess, is worked with as a goddess, as a helper spirit. People have altars to Rhiannon, and, she is a goddess. Because what makes a goddess? That's up for debate. We could say that a goddess is an entity that exists outside of humanity and thrives on its own. Or we could say that we as humans inform what is a goddess. So if we believe the character of Rhiannon is a goddess, is that enough to make her a goddess? That's up for you to decide. But just know that the original inception of Rhiannon to us as humans, she was presented to us just as a character in a story. Now, I also said that she is considered to be an amalgamation of older Celtic spirits. That is also most likely true because she does have the sovereignty label thrown on her, as a lot of Celtic women do in Celtic mythology. All these goddesses, especially the Morrigan, right? She is a woman of sovereignty. She has the power to grant sovereignty and to tell which men are sacred and noble and which men are not. And she is associated with horses. This brings us to a deity from the Gauls. We talked about the Gauls in the last episode as well. The Gauls are a tribe of people within the greater Celtic community. So, with that said, all Gauls are Celts, but not all Celts are Gauls. The Gauls are some of the most southernmost Celtic people closer to Rome. These would have been the first Celts that the Romans encountered on their conquest inland to take the Celtic, land from the Celts, which they obviously did eventually. So, a deity that comes from the Gauls is Epona or Epona. You've probably also heard of her as well in the current slew of 101 magical books you can find as a horse goddess. And sometimes that's all it'll say about her. It'll say Epona, Celtic horse goddess. That sums up about everything we do know about Epona. You may have also heard the term Epona or Eponia in the Legend of Zelda games as the name of Link's horse. Epona, from what we know, was a deity associated with horses, with fertility, with agriculture. She isn't seen as a war goddess or a goddess of death or anything like that. She's seen as like just agriculture, harvest, birth, life, the more happy light side of the world. And we can, assume that all those attributes got added to Rhiannon because in her stories, as I said, Rhiannon is always seen as a very positive person. And when she is accused of being involved in death, that of her child, not only is it not true, she very strongly makes sure everyone knows that it's not true. She is not associated with death. She is not associated with darkness. And though her stories are wrapped with negative and painful emotions, she herself does not succumb to those emotions. She is a bright, warm, life-giving, life-seeking woman. And thus we can assume so was probably Epona. I like to keep these episodes short, so we are towards the end. Yes, that is a primer on the British/Welsh character of Rhiannon and of her older Celtic, most likely counterpart, Epona. There are other horse goddesses as well. It's a bit of a phenomenon, particularly in the Gauls area of Pan-Celtica. There's definitely more for you to go and look into. Oh, before we leave, I did say that I would mention in the second branch of the Mabinogi, Rhiannon is referred to once again, although she does not appear as a character with a narrative in the second branch. She is mentioned as a woman associated with birds. And this is the only instance I have ever found personally of her being associated with small birds, not corvids, not raptors, but with like finches and sparrows and, small, tiny, seed-eating, berry-eating birds. I find that interesting. Of course, that brings in a large discussion about the association of birds with women in Celtica. And remember, when I say Celtica, I'm using that as a term for all the lands that the Celts lived in. I'm kind of using it as this name for like a quote-unquote country that the Celts lived in, if you will. And when I say Pan-Celtica, we just mean across all of Celtica. Anywho, I digress. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope that it was informative. I hope that it piqued your interest and deepened your understanding and appreciation of the Celtic people. It's something near and dear to me that my ancestry is Celtic. I, on both sides, am Scottish, primarily, with a little bit of Irish and a little bit of Welsh and a little bit of English. There is the tiniest sliver of Scandinavian, like less than 1%. So I don't really count it as much. But the Celts, it's my ancestry, it's my people, and it's probably part of your people and your ancestry. And the way we honor them and keep them alive is by remembering their stories, telling their stories, honoring their sacrifices. You only got here today to live the life you're in, whether you like it or not, the life that you are in. You got here because of the suffering and the triumphs of men and women who came before you. And some of them were Celts. Anywho, have a great one. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and ring the little bell to get notifications every time I upload a new episode of Pan-Celtica or any of my other videos. And if there's something in specific you would like me to talk about on Pan-Celtica, you can email me at elijahavalon@minister.com and let me know what you want to hear, or you can comment below this video and tell me what do you want to hear next on Pan-Celtica. Also, don't forget to follow the link down below in the description box to my website. That is alabamamagic.com, and there you can book readings with me. I have all kinds of readings I offer. Ogham readings, speaking of the Celts, runes, tarot, sticks and stones and bones, and astrology, shadow work sessions. I am also a licensed counselor, and I can offer you mental health services as well. So, check all that out. And until next time, I hope you have a great one. Be safe, be well, and be informed. Until next time.